Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth is not a celebration of scientific rigor. It is, in fact, a meticulous record of scientific failure, narrowly rescued by pure, unadulterated madness. We have been taught to idolize Professor Otto Lidenbrock, the relentless geologist, the emblem of Enlightenment-era rationality. We see him as the hero whose discipline conquers the vast, dark unknown. But what if we've misread the entire narrative? What if the expedition's greatest triumph was predicated on the systematic breakdown of every single rule, every piece of logic, and every shred of control Lidenbrock claimed to possess? This is the paradox we must confront. The moment the discipline of science won, the man of science had already lost himself to obsession. Professor Lidenbrock, introduced to us through the terrified eyes of his nephew, Axel, is the living embodiment of the scientific imperative. He is not merely dedicated, he is tyrannical. His world is measured by the manometer, the thermometer, and the precise angles of mineralogy. The opening scenes establish Lidenbrock as the architect of control, creating a strict, predictable world in his Hamburg home. But this rigidity is not the hallmark of genius, it's the armor of a man desperately afraid of the chaotic unknown, a man trying to impose a neat, intellectual framework upon an organic, violent reality. The spark that ignites this grand adventure, the coded manuscript of Arne Saknussemm, is itself the first, subtle betrayal of Lidenbrock's method. How does the great man of science engage with a monumental discovery? Does he commission an international team? Does he verify the document's provenance through methodical research? No. He locks himself in a room for days, driven by a furious, impulsive desire to decrypt a chaotic, impulsive moment, not a methodical search. The solution arrives not through measured steps, but through a flash of insight fueled by exhaustion and obsession. The foundation of this scientific journey is pure, compulsive zeal, not reasoned inquiry. Lidenbrock's subsequent preparations, the meticulous gathering of instruments, the precise calculations, the scheduling, are nothing more than a ritualistic shield against the unknown chaos. He believes that by quantifying every risk, he can somehow eliminate it. This is the illusion of method. He packs the chronometer, the barometer, and the compass, establishing a fragile dependence on external control while ignoring the one thing no instrument can measure, the extreme limit of human psychological endurance. Axel, poor, anxious Axel, is the expedition's conscience, the rational inner voice that is constantly silenced. He functions as the reader's proxy, the one who constantly points out the blindingly obvious flaws in the professor's plan, the impossibility of the journey, the lethal temperatures, the crushing pressures. Lidenbrock's response is never to reason, but to command. Silence, Axel. Science must be obeyed. Lidenbrock's rigidity manifests as a tyrannical force. He does not listen to caution, he suppresses it. This is where the critique must be sharp. Lidenbrock is not leading a scientific mission, he is enforcing a dogma. He has replaced intellectual curiosity with messianic determination. The moment he decides to descend into the extinct volcano of Snæfellsjökull, the mission becomes less about discovery and more about proving his will, regardless of the cost. The very beginning of the journey highlights the immediate obsolescence of Lidenbrock's elaborate preparations. Their descent is plagued not by complex geological problems, but by basic survival issues that his elaborate scientific knowledge fails to solve: hunger, thirst, and getting hopelessly lost. The first setback, the utter lack of water, forces the first true psychological break. In a meticulously planned scientific expedition, what should have been an immediate retreat becomes a desperate, blind push forward. Lidenbrock's great intellect, which could dissect complex mineral structures, is utterly useless when faced with the simple, primal need for hydration. His knowledge fails to generate water, it is only the relentless, almost robotic efficiency of the Icelandic guide, Hans Bjelke, the pure antithesis of the professor, who silently finds the necessary water source. This brings us to the unspoken, crucial admission: the unwritten rules of survival supersede the written rules of science. Lidenbrock requires Hans, the illiterate hunter who acts purely on instinct over logic, not as an employee, but as a silent savior. Every turn, every crisis in the dark, is navigated successfully not by Lidenbrock's calculations, but by Hans's innate, unthinking understanding of the earth. Lidenbrock's scientific arrogance forces him into a state of fragile dependence on the very thing he intellectually dismisses, the wisdom of the untutored, the power of intuition. Why this relentless adherence to discipline, even when it becomes demonstrably suicidal? The answer lies in the psychological subtext. Lidenbrock's need for control masks a terror of the subconscious. The inner world of the earth mirrors the dark, irrational spaces of the mind. By reducing the core of the earth to geological layers and quantifiable data, Lidenbrock attempts to tame the terrifying prospect of true chaos and personal psychological collapse. He is not just exploring the earth's depths, he is running from the void. His scientific method is a sophisticated defense mechanism, a declaration that I can master this because I can name it. When the instruments become useless, when the light is gone, and only the echoes of their own desperation remain, the professor's discipline begins to fray, revealing the terrified, obsessed man beneath the facade of the great scientist. The victory, if it comes, will not be the victory of his method, but the ultimate, humiliating defeat of his self-control. The method was simply the pretext. The true engine of the expedition was the unstable, compulsive need to go deeper than anyone else, a need that had already transcended all rational limitations before they even stepped foot on the boat to Iceland. This journey is not an epic of discovery, but a study of one man's escalating psychological breakdown, beautifully disguised as an act of scientific heroism. The further they descend into the subterranean abyss, the more irrelevant Professor Lidenbrock's scientific dogma becomes. The methodical, structured universe he carried with him from Hamburg begins to dissolve, replaced by a harsh reality where survival hinges not on calculation, but on transgression. This is the central crisis of the expedition, the point where the scientific mission mutates into a desperate, primal quest, a journey where necessity utterly defeats methodology. The most damning example of this paradigm shift is the acid-water decision. Faced with paralyzing thirst, a meticulous, disciplined geologist, a professor of mineralogy, a man whose life is devoted to understanding chemical properties, is forced to order the consumption of water mixed with highly corrosive acid. This is not a calculated risk, it is a violation of every medical and chemical rule he swore by. Lidenbrock's action here is pure, unthinking surrender. It is the moment the primal instinct of survival, thirst, overrides sophisticated, life-preserving knowledge. The professor of science, the architect of control, becomes the conductor of an irrational act. In that moment, Lidenbrock is no different from a desperate sailor drinking salt water. His great intellect could not provide the solution, it could only provide the justification for his own terrifying moment of surrender to the immediate biological imperative. The logic of the university fails in the face of the logic of the body. This necessary descent into irrationality is facilitated by the unwavering presence of Hans Bjelke, the Icelandic guide. Hans is the ultimate antithesis of Lidenbrock. He doesn't carry instruments or a compass, he carries intuition, quiet strength, and a profound, wordless understanding of the natural world. He is the living embodiment of instinct consistently validating itself over calculation. When Lidenbrock is arguing with Axel about barometric pressure or geological strata, Hans is simply walking, simply surviving. The guide's silent correctness becomes a mocking echo to the professor's increasingly frantic reliance on useless knowledge. Consider the dynamic. The highly educated German needs the illiterate Icelander not just for guidance, but for correction. Every success they have, finding a route, locating water, surviving extreme conditions, is an implicit vote for Hans's primal wisdom and a loss for Lidenbrock's complex theories. Science, we realize, is simply the loud, arrogant passenger, instinct is the engine driver. As they push deeper, the instruments Lidenbrock so carefully packed become tragically obsolete. The precision tools, the pride of modern science, are rendered useless. How do you measure time when you are underground for weeks, devoid of the sun's rhythm? The loss of time destroys the clockwork precision of Lidenbrock's schedule. How do you chart direction when the magnetic fields are erratic? The compass is unreliable. The scientific tools, meant to extend human control, simply reflect the utter lack of control they truly possess. This descent is not a methodical experiment, it is an act of intellectual blindness. The emotional toll begins to crack Lidenbrock's iron facade. This is most vividly captured during the terrifying sequence when Axel is separated from his companions. The Lidenbrock-Axel argument is more than just a family quarrel, it's the internal conflict between knowledge and sanity, played out in the dark. Axel, terrified and rational, begs for retreat. Lidenbrock, obsessed and deaf, demands progress. This conflict proves that the professor is no longer acting as a scientist, but as a monomaniac, prioritizing an abstract goal over human life. When Axel is lost, Lidenbrock doesn't consult his geological charts, he screams. The sudden, violent eruption of raw, undisciplined emotion is the truth escaping the confines of his severe personality. This is the emotional breakdown, the moment when the professor's discipline momentarily cracks, revealing the depth of his obsessive need. His scientific fervor has pushed him past the point of no return, a psychological barrier where retreat is no longer a rational option, only forward momentum, however irrational. The irony deepens as Lidenbrock must rely on a physical phenomenon, the propagation of sound in stone, to communicate with Axel. A moment of pure, desperate survival demands a physics solution, but the desperation is self-inflicted, born from the professor's initial lack of psychological discipline. He used science to initiate the journey, but he uses raw, physical desperation to sustain it. Furthermore, the deeper they go, the more the environment itself mocks Lidenbrock's discipline. The heat, the exhaustion, the claustrophobia, these are not problems that require algebraic equations, they require brute physical and mental endurance, the kind embodied by Hans, not the intellectual kind embodied by the professor. Lidenbrock's body and mind are betraying the rigidity he sought to impose. He is not navigating the earth, he is being dragged through it by a single, powerful, and utterly insane impulse. We must conclude that the success of this part of the journey is not a credit to Lidenbrock's intellect. It is a terrifying testament to human endurance and the accidental virtue of losing control. He didn't conquer the geological obstacles, he simply survived them through sheer, illogical force of will, a quality far removed from the cold, measured discipline he champions. He survives by becoming something he despises, an irrational, desperate adventurer. The scientific victory is fading, the triumph of primal need is all that remains. Having shed the pretense of methodology in the earlier stages, Professor Lidenbrock and his companions now enter a domain where chaos reigns supreme. This is the subterranean world where the laws of surface physics and geology are violently defied, forcing the scientific expedition to become a religious pilgrimage of blind faith, driven forward solely by the momentum of obsession and astronomical luck. The geological environment itself becomes the ultimate mocker of human knowledge. They discover the underground sea, a vast, impossible body of water existing at depths that should be molten. This is an environment that defies all known geological models. Lidenbrock, the famed geologist, is confronted with a reality that renders his life's work irrelevant. His reaction is not to halt and recalculate, but to double down on his obsession, replacing scientific rigor with a messianic determination. He names the sea, attempting to impose intellectual order, but the sea itself remains an untamable, primal force. The most profound realization of the expedition's inherent madness is experienced by Axel. His deep fear crystallizes into the understanding that they are not explorers mastering nature, they are tiny, disposable elements swept up in a violent, indifferent system. When Lidenbrock insists on crossing the newly found sea on a makeshift raft, the journey becomes an act of total, irrational dependency. The raft journey is a total dependency on luck and meteorological violence. The storm that erupts on the Lidenbrock Sea is the ultimate symbol of chaos theory applied to their endeavor. It is a pure, untamable force of nature, mocking human effort. This storm is not an environmental factor to be measured and predicted, it is an act of God, a blind, brutal stroke of fortune that Lidenbrock can only survive by clinging desperately to the raft, not by consulting his barometer. His scientific equipment, meant to give him control, is tossed about like a child's toy. When Lidenbrock attempts to use the compass to chart a course across the turbulent waters, the instrument of orientation instantly becomes a symbol of total disorientation. The compass needle spins wildly, rendering navigation impossible. This compass failure is a pivotal moment. Lidenbrock's last tether to his ordered, quantifiable world breaks. From this point forward, the trajectory of their mission is no longer determined by the professor's will or calculation, but by the random, unpredictable drift of the current and the direction of the storm. Furthermore, the encounter with primitive life forms and the realization of the vast scale of this internal world demonstrates that Verne's story is less about scientific investigation and more about entering a domain where human intellect is dramatically simplified. They find a world where Darwinian laws are violently simplified, where the advanced theories Lidenbrock espouses are less useful than the sheer ability to run and hide. The moment of separation, whether by accident or Lidenbrock's relentless, unthinking drive, forces Axel into a terrifying isolation. It underscores that the professor's drive is inherently selfish and dangerous. It is a pursuit that constantly risks the lives of his companions, a pursuit that, if it were truly disciplined, would have mandated retreat long ago. As they approach the center, they face the final barrier, the solid, unyielding rock. Lidenbrock's intellect, which allowed him to hypothesize about this depth, cannot breach it. The realization that scientific knowledge has run its course is stark. His geology, chemistry, and physics cannot tunnel through that final defense. The only way forward is not by science, but by a desperate, brute force application of explosives, an act of destructive madness, not refined knowledge. The paradox of reaching the center is that the goal is achieved entirely by accident, not design. The explosion meant to clear a path instead opens a massive chasm, plunging them into a random, violent passage. They do not calculate their way forward, they fall their way forward. The final descent is a total loss of control, a free fall into the unknown, culminating in the ultimate triumph of chance over method. The great geological discovery is not made through careful measurement, but because they happen to be in the path of a natural, catastrophic event. Lidenbrock's success in reaching the core coordinates is thus revealed to be a monumental failure of his own self-proclaimed discipline. He did not navigate to the center, he was carried there, kicking and screaming, by the forces of chaos, luck, and his own single-minded, almost insane determination. The victory belongs not to Professor Otto Lidenbrock the scientist, but to Professor Otto Lidenbrock the chaotic force of nature. The ultimate paradox of Lidenbrock's victory is not realized at the moment of discovery, but at the moment of their forced return. Having penetrated the earth through an act of sheer, irrational force, their exit is equally violent and uncontrolled. The moment of eruption is the ultimate loss of control, the chaotic pinnacle of their success. They are not ascending according to any plan, they are being violently spat out by the very internal forces they sought to master. The nature of the return is not a controlled ascent, but a randomized, lucky escape. Carried upwards by the terrifying power of a magma flow within an active volcano, the expedition relies entirely on the probability of the eruption following a safe channel. Their survival is owed to geological chance and thermal physics, not the professor's navigation skills. Lidenbrock's disciplined descent was a series of choices, his ascent is a series of catastrophic accidents. He began the journey demanding control over nature, and he ends it as a helpless projectile, jettisoned back onto the surface. When they finally emerge, landing miraculously in the crater of Stromboli, the scientific community's reaction becomes the final layer of irony. They celebrate the result, the phenomenal coordinates, the geological specimens, the sheer achievement, while willfully ignoring the method. The narrative immediately shifts to sanitizing the madness. Lidenbrock, the survivor, meticulously edits his account, presenting his findings as the triumph of rational investigation. The true story, the dehydration, the acid water, the blind panic, the total reliance on Hansa's instinct, the near-fatal mistakes, and the volcanic ejection, is carefully omitted or framed as calculated heroism. This is the ultimate concealment of the truth. The scientific success is packaged as a repeatable, verifiable experiment, when in reality, it was a historical anomaly, a unique, non-replicable event achieved through near-suicidal luck. The world champions the professor, elevating his image of rigid, relentless discipline, because it's a safer narrative than admitting the truth, that the greatest scientific leaps often require a detour through the darkest corridors of obsession and irrationality. The quiet tragedy of the book belongs not to the professor, but to Axel. Axel is the survivor who truly understands the profound failure of reason. He is the one who witnessed the collapse of his uncle's logic, the impotence of scientific tools, and the sheer power of primal fear. He returns transformed, a wiser, yet perhaps more terrified man, burdened with the knowledge that the pursuit of knowledge, when divorced from humane self-control, quickly spirals into self-destruction. Lidenbrock, conversely, is fundamentally unchanged. He remains the tyrannical, obsessed figure, having learned nothing about moderation or the limits of intellectual hubris. He views the journey not as a lesson in humility, but as validation of his own ruthless will. The failure of discipline is completely ignored. The lesson that should have been learned, that obsession nearly killed them, is dismissed in favor of fame and glory. This leads us to the final, necessary critique. The true lesson of Journey to the Center of the Earth is not the power of knowledge, but that knowledge is merely a vessel, but instinct is the engine of breakthrough. The scientific method failed to prevent disaster, failed to secure water, failed to navigate, and failed to bring them home. It was the irrational drive, the primal force of the earth, and the pure instinct of a silent hunter that secured the result. The map and the chronometer were the pretext, the madness was the truth. The victory Lidenbrock achieves is not a victory of science over nature, but a victory of human compulsion over human reason. It is the great paradox. He succeeded because he became the thing he despised, a reckless, irrational force of nature himself. So, the next time you read Jules Verne, look beyond the adventure. Look at the trembling hand of Axel, the cold indifference of Hans, and the manic obsession in Lidenbrock's eyes. Are we, in our modern pursuit of breakthroughs and disruptive innovations, any different? Do we celebrate the result while ignoring the dangerously reckless methods that achieved it? We challenge you, if success requires you to abandon every principle of self-control, is that victory truly yours, or is it merely luck dressed up as discipline? Drop your thoughts below. Which literary hero needs their methods critiqued next? Subscribe to the Emotive archive and let us dismantle the legends, one calculated failure at a time.